It had to be said. Welcome. In today's Hot Topic, we're covering a developing story in New York, where a judge, after only preliminary review of a case, has declared that a Florida man is guilty of massive business fraud. The first several days of the trial have been quite eventful. On the first day, a member of the defendant's crack legal team berated the judge for announcing that he will oversee the trial without a jury. Until, that is, the judge pointed out that it was the lawyer's responsibility to ask for a jury trial, which they either didn't know or had forgotten to do, having been quite busy that week. A second lawyer seemed to completely forget his client's name during arguments, referring to him as the man from Florida, or eventually just pointing to him and calling him that very, very tan man over there. The third stooge seemed to forget that he was on the defense team altogether. He began laying out all of the crimes that man committed, and how he should face the full force of the law. When reminded by the judge of his role, he lowered his head and muttered, "May I be excused? I think I'm going to be sick," not to return to the court again. And that was just the first day. After court adjourned that day, a supporter of the defendant sent out a drawing on social media showing Jesus, clad in his iconic robe, sitting next to him and scowling at the courtroom. The defendant expressed great admiration for the drawing, but may have taken it a bit too literally. During the next day's proceedings, he insisted that an empty chair be placed next to him for his friend. Throughout the proceedings, he could be seen and heard speaking to the empty space about the trial, and what he thought his friend should do to the judge and prosecutors. At one point, he loudly upbraided his attorneys for not calling the man as a witness, and indeed stood up and asked the judge if he could override their advice and call his star witness himself. Once the court figured out what he was talking about, the prosecutor, with a sly smile, told the judge that she would not object, as long as she was allowed to cross-examine the witness. Perhaps sensing a trap, he turned to the empty chair and threw up his arms. "He's gone. You drove him away with your disrespect, just like he did to the tax auditors who had set up shop in his business offices." Once the court was back under control, the defendant could be seen to have drawn a stick figure with long hair on the back of a sheet of paper which he took out of his briefcase and propped up on the seat next to him. On the third day, the judge seems to have reached a limit with the defendant's disruptive behavior. Groaning, throwing his arms up, moaning to his lawyers, violent shifts in posture. When scolded, the defendant furiously whispered to one of the lawyers, who then offered an explanation. "Your Honor, the defendant being a man of a certain age, though in perfect condition, his prostrate gland is a bit larger than previous, which is perfectly normal. So he just has to pee really badly." When queried incredulously by the judge why he hadn't just asked to be excused, the lawyer offered this. "Look, Your Honor, he hasn't had to sit still for this long since third grade, okay? And his grade school teacher back then was very strict about bathroom breaks. You sort of look a little bit like him, and frankly, he just didn't want to give you the satisfaction of telling him to shut up and sit still until recess. On that note, the judge gavelled the day's proceedings to a close. Stay tuned to this space for ongoing coverage, and in the meantime, think about this, if you will. Who should play the defendant in the sitcom version on cable?